It's scary to me as a mother. I have 3 children. To go to work and know that I may not be able to get back across to my babies.
It was very emotional. We were all just watching the water come in the building and watching it come over the wall. You just feel that instant moment of devastation and you're like, okay, we got to regroup and keep going.
We started with plan A during the winter of what you're going to plant where, and I think we're probably on our 15th plan at least now.
I'm just praying that God will keep his hands on everything and let all my stuff be all right.
But whoever the bags are going to, I just want to let that person know that I care about them. And even though I don't know them, I love them.
You're looking high over the confluence of the Ohio and Mississippi rivers, both the site of historic flooding in 2019. Thank you for joining us. I'm Kathy Sweeney along the Mississippi River in Alexander County.
And I'm Grant Dade along the Ohio River.
The Heartland knows flooding well, but this year the water was relentless, lasting for months.
Over the next 30 minutes, you're going to meet people who try to live their normal lives in the middle of something that is far from normal.
You'll also see the damage and hear from our reporters about what covering an event of this magnitude is like and what they remember most.
We begin with the rising waters along the mighty Mississippi. In Cape Girardeau, the river spent well over 100 days above flood stage. You can see from this Drone 12 video just how high the water got on the flood wall downtown. The crest in Cape Girardeau happened on June 12th at 46.29 feet. That's the 5th highest crest ever recorded. Flood stage is 32 feet. South to Cairo and Alexander County, Illinois, which received historic flooding early in 2019 along the Ohio River, the high water closed the Cairo Bridge on February 22nd, and 1 week later, the crest happened on March 1st at 56.48 feet. It's the 4th highest crest ever recorded on the Ohio River in Cairo. Flood stage there is 40 feet. That same winter flooding hit east of Cairo over in Paducah and McCracken County. The Ohio River rose so much, you can see the floodgates had to be installed along the waterfront. The crest here happened on February 25th at 53.27 feet. That's the 5th highest crest ever on the Ohio River in Paducah. Flood stage there is 39 feet.
I am here in the place hardest hit by flooding this year, East Cape Girardeau, Illinois. We came over the Bill Emerson Bridge, and like these trucks you see, we very carefully drove through more than a foot of water in places. I can tell you, after covering flooding in this area for 30 years, I have never seen anything like this. Now, here in East Cape, they have dealt with it all. Evacuations, road closures, near constant sandbagging. At one point, this tiny town welcomed 150 Guard members and all their help. Boy, that energy boosted spirits. Leaders here in East Cape say they were overwhelmed by how residents came out to help and support each other.
I thought, well, we'll call and a few people will say yes and a few people will say no, and nobody said no.
These residents have been through this kind of flooding before, but not for this long. Some say it comes with the territory.
I didn't think it'd get this high. Now, it's been on my foundation, my house, about every 3 years. Water get up, but it ain't never got up this high. And this time it caught me by surprise.
The nearby communities of McClure and Olive Branch also battling rising water since March. This is as close as we can get you to the intersection of Route 146 and Route 3 way down that way. Nobody is driving through all this water except the National Guard units you see right here. This is why the Bill Emerson Bridge is closed. This is why so many people are going an hour plus out of their way, because they cannot get through all this water. Grant, the closure of these 2 roads impacts thousands of people in the Heartland. For those trying to get back and forth from Illinois to Cape, the drive went from 30 or 40 minutes to an hour and a half, even 2 hours.
It's just bad. I'm ready to get back to normal, but it's just one of those things, you have to deal with it.
The high water on the Mississippi River also closed the Chester Bridge on June 2nd. You can see how high the water got in this Drone 12 video. The major traffic mess along Route 3 and 146 was eased just a little when the Chester Bridge reopened on June 22nd. And back on February 22nd, the Cairo Bridge, which connects Illinois and Kentucky, closed due to the Ohio River flooding. It reopened on March 11th.
A closer look now at how this historic Heartland flooding unfolded. The calendar barely rolled over to 2019 when the Ohio River started to rise. On February 11th, the Ohio at Paducah went above flood stage and kept going. The floodgates were installed along the Paducah waterfront. Across the river, officials at Harrah's Casino in Metropolis hoped they wouldn't have to close.
Our main goal is to keep this place open, to keep it going, because when it is shut down, unfortunately, it does impact the economy, the local economy.
But as the water inched closer, Harrah's was forced to shut down on February 18th. Flooding got the attention of new Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, who came to tour the damage on February 26th.
You should all know that we're going to be back whenever anything happens to this community that we can be helpful with. That's what the state of Illinois is here to do, to back you up and to stand up for you.
Harrah's reopened its casino on March 19th, but it took more time for the hotel to get back in business. The Ohio River finally went back below flood stage in Paducah on March 24th. Ironically, as the Ohio River started going down back in March, the Mississippi began its historic rise. I'm here at the famous floodgate in downtown Cape Girardeau. It closed back on March 14th after the river went above flood stage. And the next day, on March 15th, the Broadway floodgates also closed. Between mid-March and the beginning of May, the Mississippi River rose steadily. It impacted the Boot Heel first, as you can see from this Drone 12 video in New Madrid County on March 21st.
I'm afraid it's going to get worse before it gets better, but it's nothing out of the ordinary for us.
That's Sheriff Terry Stevens talking about the reality of living in this area. By the end of May, the Mississippi River had been above flood stage for more than 2 months. On May 22nd, seep water started appearing in East Cape Girardeau in Alexander County. Volunteers from Shawnee High School filled sandbags, trying to keep the water from getting into homes and over roads. The flood fight was on.
We know that if we need help in like Ware or Grand Tower, they're going to come up and help us. So we're going to come down here and help them.
The seep water continued to creep up on roads and homes in East Cape, and on June 10th, evacuations began.
I'm just praying that God will keep his hands on everything and let all my stuff be all right.
But then a new problem, the seep water slowly devouring the busy routes 3 and 146.
I mean, it's frustrating, but I don't know what I could tell somebody to do that could have prevented this.
Once again, I'm standing in seep water, but this time I'm on Grapevine Trail, which if we're open, you could get to McClure, Illinois. The other way you could get there usually is through Route 3, which is located across this flooded field. Our own Carly O'Keefe would take Route 3 every day on the way to work, and she would keep you up to date on the latest conditions. We're about to hear from her on what that was like. Plus, we're going to hear from some of our other reporters on what it was like covering this historic event.
Having covered so many floods during my tenure here at KFES, I really didn't think that Route 3 would go under. I definitely didn't think that Route 146 would go under. That was something that was a surprise and a shock to me because while that water was inching up and I was watching it daily just continue to rise, I thought it'll never get over Route 3. It never has, not since '93. You know, everyone said that. I would say duration is the biggest difference here because in past floods, it went up quick and it went down quick. But this has been so sustained. It's not like when we have a levee breach and it comes all at once. I mean, this was a silent creeping that just daily kept increasing and being more and more menacing. So that was a surprise to me.
This will be a record event on duration.
An inside look at how Cape City leaders are dealing with the never-ending high water. And Grant and Laura look at where all this water came from and how much rain we got the first half of 2019. That's all just ahead. The Mississippi River here and the Ohio have both been high this year, the Mississippi for a long time.
In fact, Cape Girardeau, Paducah, and Cairo have all seen top 5 historic record crests this year. But why? Where did all this water come from? This all started in the winter with 2 significant blizzards across the Midwest and the Upper Plains that deposited an amazing amount of snow across Nebraska and the Dakotas, Minnesota, and Iowa. Then the stage was set in spring for a stormy, wet spring to fall on top of all that snow. So when areas in Nebraska, South Dakota, Iowa would receive 4 inches of rain over a couple of days, they were in fact receiving closer to 8 inches of rain, and that sent all that melted snow and water to the heartland.
And all that water sent 6 barges through a levee breach in Alexander County. It happened on July 3rd. The barges were on the still flooded Mississippi River when they broke loose and were carried through a breach in the Len Small levee. It still has a hole in it from the 2016 flooding.
You're watching Flood 2019, High Water in the Heartland on KFES 12, sponsored by the Jewel Law Firm.
All the other ones we bounce back up from, but this flood this time has destroyed 48 years of my life. It's a mess, and it ain't never going to be the same.
That's McClure resident Bobby Long talking about how hard the flooding's been on him and his family. Now, when a natural disaster like this one happens, we at KFES tell the story best by talking to you.
Nathan Elgren, who reports for Heartland News at 10, shares stories from those of you who open your homes and your hearts.
In Mississippi County, we're talking in the millions of dollars.
I spoke to farmers like Glenn Alt who rely on roads and levees that are crumbling under the pressure of floodwaters.
We have a highway VV in Mississippi County that there's a 20-foot hole in the road. It took the blacktop out, put it out in the field. We actually had a levee, had about a 15 to 20-foot top on it, and it looked like it cracked right down the middle and slid one side of it.
In towns like Caruthersville, it caused sewer issues and sinkholes, making homeowners uneasy.
I'm disabled, I'm in a wheelchair. It's kind of scary to me because if I would fall in one of these sinkholes, my van wouldn't operate, I couldn't get out, I'm just there.
In some cases, these flooded roads were a matter of life and death. I spoke to a mother who barely survived a heart attack after taking a boat, an ambulance, and a helicopter just to get to the hospital.
It was terrifying. The thought of having to let my kids sit there and watch me die, if that was it. I didn't want that, but that could have happened because of all the rerouting.
Those same road closures forced medical staff to spend the night at hospitals. One nurse tells me it's a worthy sacrifice to save lives. Nathan Elgren, Heartland News.
I've never seen anything like this in my life, and having to witness people being forced out of their homes because of water coming up 6 feet inside their homes and having to take all their belongings that they can in a boat and leave their home for an unknown amount of time, you just can't really erase that image from your mind.
We've been just overwhelmed with the flood.
I've spent several weeks in East Cape Girardeau, Illinois, and I've witnessed the people sandbagging day in and day out to save their homes because the water is so close to their homes and in their homes. I was talking with a woman and she told me that she just doesn't know how much longer she can fight. And she wakes up every single morning thinking about having to save her home and goes to bed thinking the exact same thing, so she just can't escape it at this point. And having to see them live this and not even be able to escape it is really just hard to see.
On June 21st, severe weather across the heartland added insult to injury for those already dealing with so much here in East Cape. Leaders issued a voluntary evacuation order after strong winds pushed water over the sandbag wall and onto the street. Some 7 inches of water got into the town's community building. Volunteers and National Guard soldiers quickly managed to shore up the weak points in that wall. The Mississippi River is the second longest river in North America and is crucial to the economy of the upper Midwest. Heavy rainfall there and back here in the heartland greatly impacts those river levels.
And with all the flooding we've had here in the heartland, it's no surprise we're well above average for this time of the year with our rainfall. Here's Laura Wibbemeyer to tell you exactly how far above average we are.
When you see the flooding around the Heartland, yes, of course, it's easy to tell. We've seen too much rainfall, but these numbers really tell the picture. So these amounts in the first column are the rain totals from January 1st through June 30th. So far in Cape Girardeau, we've seen over 35 inches of rainfall. So on average, we see about 24 inches of rainfall. So that puts us at about a 43% above where we normally are for that period. Same story in Paducah, more than 44 inches of rainfall so far. Normal is about 25.5 inches. Look at that, a 72% above where we are normally for that period. And then Carbondale is a similar story, more than 34 inches of rainfall so far this year. 23 is about normal, and that puts us at 50% above where we usually are this time of year.
The floodgate here on Broadway in Cape Girardeau has been closed since mid-March. When the Mississippi River gets this high, public work officials have to constantly monitor the water level, the wall, and pumps, and sometimes have to place sandbags down by these floodgates.
We're fortunate that this event has just been really long, but not really dramatic for us.
In Cape Girardeau, trillions of gallons of water passed through the city over the duration of the flood. That's 4 times the amount of water that comes through when the river is not above flood stage. Public Works Director Stan Polovic says manning the pump stations 24 hours a day is a tall order.
And when you do that for 100 and something days, even when it's a rotation, it still is very tiring.
Yeah.
And we will be delighted when we can open everything back up and let the river go.
Polovic says before this year, the longest period the river at Cape was above flood stage was back in 1993. That was 125 days.
A lot of guys have taken from the community. This is just another way for us to give back.
One story I'm always going to remember was when the inmates were sandbagging at the Murfreesboro Life Skills Reentry Center. It just blew me away that these guys who had, done terrible things, and I got to talking to them about these sandbags. Something as simple as putting sand in a bag and then shipping it off to the communities around them, and the way that they felt like they were a part of the community. They felt like what they were doing was making a difference, and it was. I think in something like a week, they filled like 30,000 bags just from that one facility. Even though they couldn't see the floodwaters from where they were at, they wanted to help because they belong in this community too. And it was just really just heartwarming to see that happen. And it really just makes me reflect more and more on just how great the people that live in the Heartland are.
The remnants of Tropical Storm Barry arrived to a very saturated Heartland on July 15th and 16th. This is in East Cape Girardeau, an area devastated by seep water. You can see the Illinois National Guard reinforcing the sandbag levees that protect homes and businesses. The Red Cross is also in East Cape, helping those in need. Here are some of the top historic river crests at several locations in the Heartland.
The floodwaters brought out some interesting sights. Check out these Asian carp going crazy near a pump on the Clear Creek Levee in Alexander County.
And the banks of the flooded Mississippi are the place to catch some really big catfish. John at Frank's Real Bait Shop tells us that's because the fish like to get to the clear floodwater along the shore. We found some folks trying to take advantage of that good fishing. 2019 has been a tough year for those affected by the flooding, but one Grand Tower resident we met is hopeful for the future.
It's a lot of anxiety. It's a lot of stress. You don't know what the future brings. You don't know if you can go back in and clean your house. There's always a light at the end of the tunnel, no matter what the situation is. We've just been handed flooding this time. We can handle it. It's going to go down. So there's a future for us.
Thank you for letting us in and sharing your stories with us during this difficult time. It's been our honor.
And we appreciate you watching. Good night.